we've just lived in. The first one we often call a mechanistic system, yeah, because it works like a machine. It has very ordered ways of direction, reporting, communication, decision-making, authority. You know exactly what you can do, what you cannot do, who you can talk to, who you're not associated with. There might be a silo of people on one side not connected to the silo on the other side with no communication or integration. Yeah, very common model. It's one way of organizing ourselves as humans to do good work in the world. And it's based on a machine. It's a mechanistic model. The funny thing is, humans aren't machines, right? We're living beings. We're part of a living system. And in a living system, we trust that we actually need to be in relationship with one another. We need to be in relationship with the planet, with the air we need to breathe, with the food that grows in the soil, that's fed by the rain. We're in relationship with all of these things, right? So why is it that we organize in mechanistic systems when we are actually living systems? We are what we call complex adaptive systems. So humans adapt to whatever's happening in the moment, right? If something shifts, even in a really structured environment, in Hanoi, oh, we're going to pave this street now, and we're going to tear down this building, and we're going to move that, and it just adjusts itself, like I've never seen in my life. Fantastic. And just the streets, just the motorcycles in Hanoi are the most amazing complex adaptive system I've ever seen. Other than a chaord of birds flying through the air that have the same rules you just walked. Don't bump into anybody because we fall down. Right? But you can go wherever you want. But you triangulate with two others. Yeah? This is how chaords work. This is how fish swim. These are complex adaptive systems. Humans move that way. That's why you can cross the street in Hanoi. If you did it this way, the way we do it in America, and you try to cross the street, when the light's the wrong color, you get hit. Right? Very dangerous to cross the street here. It adapts here. It's almost counterintuitive. Okay, so our worldview, right, the way we perceive the world to be, is what determines how we organize ourselves to do the work we're doing, or to live in our families. And the piece about this that's different is the word mechanistic and the word complex. And what I want to do is make sure we're all using the same language. What do we mean when we say mechanistic? And what do we mean when we say complex?
So can I ask you just to see the word mechanistic? Maybe right.
Yep. I'll put this right here so you can see it. Well, thankfully, there's a scientific framework that helps us understand the difference between the way systems are ordered. And this framework was developed by a researcher named Dave Snowden, and he's named it the Cynefin framework, which is a Welsh word. And it's spelled, it looks like Cynefin, so don't look at it when you say it or you'll say it wrong. It's Cynefin. Cynefin. It takes years to remember, so don't worry about it right now. The beauty of it is it helps us understand what is the situation we're in right now in this moment, and based on that, what's the leadership that's needed? What is the most appropriate way to organize ourselves to address that situation? It's just a pretty simple question. What's the best way to organize ourselves to address the situation at hand? So within this, there are 4 kinds of situations, and the 5th one where we don't actually know what the situation is, kind of in the center. And I'm going to speak very briefly to each one. So the first type of situation we would call simple or obvious. And all of these situations are identifying the link between what causes the effect that we see. So the link between cause and effect. If I drop this pen, what will happen? Fall down and hit the floor, right? Cause, effect. It's going to happen every time I do it, right? I can make it more efficient by dropping it closer to the floor. Happens quicker, right? Simple link, very direct link between cause and effect. This is an ordered system, okay? In that ordered system, we know exactly what to do every time. So if you think of like in a manufacturing, in an assembly line, we're putting together the pieces for this pen. It's a setup so that we can do it better, faster, more efficient, over and over and over, because we always know the link between cause and effect becomes very fast and very efficient. And we need those ways of working. When the link between cause and effect has more variables and it's more mysterious, we actually need some analysis to figure out, how does this link, because that goes this way and then this thing is happening and then here, and oh wait a minute, that goes here and this thing kind of went like that, and aha, okay, so there is a link between cause and effect, but it has many, many variables before you see the effect. In a complicated system, with enough analysis and sort of expert input, we can identify each of these pathways so that we can repeat the same path. We know exactly, oh, yep, that one goes like that, and this is where we get. And we can do it over and over and over. Once we figure this out with enough expert analysis, it's repeatable. So in a simple, the example was a factory assembly line. We're always going to get the same thing. Complicated, think about space travel. Okay? We can figure out how to build the rocket ship, and we can figure out this much more complicated way to get that rocket to the moon, which seems impossibly complex. It's actually complicated because we can not only figure it out, we can repeat it. Okay? Once we have figured out that funny path, we can do it again. If it's predictable, it's an ordered system. Okay? In an ordered system, a mechanistic model is helpful. Maybe it's an airplane. I want that airplane to land safely every time. I would really like it if that was an ordered system to got me where I'm going. Really? That would be great. I don't want something not predictable when I buckle in. In a complex system, the link between cause and effect spans over so much time with so many variables that you can't actually see what caused the effect until it's happened and you look back in time and go, oh, that's why the climate's changing. Yeah, I wish we'd known that 40 years ago, right? But we didn't because we can't predict. There are too many variables impacting. So in complexity, experts can't really tell us which way to go. There is no way to analyze what you don't know the outcome will be. So experts help us in this space. Here, we actually need more than any one expert can tell us. We need all of the perspective and wisdom and intelligence of everybody in a whole system to actually find some new knowledge that nobody brought to the conversation or to the innovation lab to try and find the solution. It's not possible to bring in an expert to analyze it and tell you. Now, you need experts for different aspects of this to bring in more information, more knowledge for you to work with, but no one of them can find the answer. Does that make sense? So pardon?
Sorry, maybe again.
So when there's, let's see, so climate change is the one example of something that's, when I was teenager teaching people to recycle, 40 years ago, there wasn't a understanding that anything was changing in such a negative way. It was like, we need to fix some things, but as time went on, the complexity of that impacts the feedback loops in the system that were creating so much change in the climate, we couldn't see what was causing that. But now that we're here, we understand some of the causes, and some of them we don't. And now we're trying to predict what's going to happen next. And every time we predict it, we're wrong. It's happening faster because we can't see all the variables that are impacting, really, because they have a multiplying synergistic effect that we can't see in advance. But once we're there, we can look backwards and go, that's why it is. So it's another example. My favorite one is try to raise the same teenager twice. Right? You can't figure it out and then replicate a teenager and get the same one. There are too many variables impacting that life that you cannot control, see, predict. Can't do it. Can't do it. You can create the conditions in which you can pray a lot and hope that a good effect will happen, but it's not predictable. All right? So when we're working in a complex domain, this approach, this participatory approach, where we need many, many, many insights, perspectives, ideas, really sensing what's emerging, what new knowledge wants to come, that's what this work is for. Okay? So this needs a participatory approach.
Why you need participatory approach for complex?
Because we can't just ask an expert to tell us how to solve a problem. We need all of perspectives in the room. And hosting conversation is a way to bring in all of those perspectives. I've got one more here to go through that I think we'll get to that. Let me just finish this one.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Just come back a little bit for
Okay.
the complicated. From my understanding, that in complicated situation, the cause and the effect cannot be see the link from the beginning. So how to distinguish the complex and the complicated here?
It's not that it can't be seen. It's that it takes a lot of analysis and data and research to figure it out. In a simple system, it's very obvious what the link is. In a complicated system, it's going to take longer and more analysis, but you can figure it out. And at first, it may seem complex, and so you send off a lot of little research projects to see what begins to show up, and then you realize, okay, there is a pattern. We can see it. In a chaotic system, there is no link between. So this is, there's a flood, there's a war, there's a tsunami. It's chaos. Everything falls apart. In that system, a different kind of leadership is needed. So what these do is tell us ways of looking at what's happening right now, what's the situation we're in, and based on that, what kind of leadership is needed now. Okay? So chaos, it might be a flood, any kind of natural disaster, any kind of crisis. The way to know if you're in chaos, if you even have an inkling of what to do, you're not in chaos, you're in complexity. Okay? And the idea of acting in chaos is to actually move closer to complexity so that you can gather people together to figure out what's the next wise step to move into finding the collective intelligence. I want to talk just, this last piece is kind of the reason why we're doing what we're doing and really foundational to the work, and I'm going to try and go fast because I know we're over time. How far over are we, Steve? We're at time, okay. So I'm going to talk fast and we can talk about this at lunch. So just as we're looking at ordered systems that might need a more mechanistic approach, and unordered systems, complex and chaotic, that actually respond better because it's a living adaptive model that works for these. In a system, in all of life, there is a realm, what's the word I'm trying to find? between chaos and control. Continuum, thank you. In ordered systems, there is a lot of control and order that allows us to get more of the same, right? It's predictable, we can get more of the same. And the leadership practice in systems that sit between order and control rises right here, and it might be called management. Yeah? And management is where we work to get more of the same. And there are incredible management leadership training programs all around the world. If you want to do that, fantastic, we need managers. That is the domain between order and control, where we need to keep a rhythm of getting more of the same. When we're in a complex adaptive system, order and control is not something you can rely on because it's not predictable, because it is self-determining. A living adaptive system only follows its own decision, its own order. You had the freedom to move where you wanted to move with just those two rules. This space between chaos and order, in the art of hosting, we call this the Chaordic path. This space right here. We've made up this word. We didn't actually. A man named D. Hawk did when he invented the Visa card, which is designed to function as a business model, as a complex adaptive system. So this was originally invented to function as a business model in a complex adaptive living way, right? So chaos and order, the intersection between chaos and order that allows movement and possibility and freedom and innovation, and still enough rules to keep the system together, right? And in this space, we often talk about what rises here. You could say innovation. And we often, in our definition that I shared yesterday, this is what we would call leadership, which is not to say management isn't also a form of leadership. That's not what that means. But the kind of participatory leadership, and what comes out of this, which we're going to talk about later today, is emergence, which is when something new arises that was not there before. That's what comes out of this space between chaos and order, okay? And so leading in a way that you can know what to do when you don't know what to do, because something new just happened that's never happened before. That's a different leadership stance. It takes a different set of skills, tools, and those interpersonal capacities in order to stand in that unknown fire. And that's what Art of Hosting is teaching and practicing. The skills and the tools and the personal capacities to lead in this unknown of emergence when it's needed to address a complex world. That's why we do this. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes. Welcome to that. That was very fast. We can talk all week about these things if you have more questions.
There's no way to do questions.
They're wondering about Kaimos.
Oh, what is that funny word? Yeah. I don't even know how to say it. I've heard shamos, kaimos. So this, on this continuum, chaos and order can go into control and really restrictive control, or it can go into shamos, or destructive chaos, really like war, and right, really destructive. So it's a continuum of situations that states of being. Okay.
So, what's the link between? So this leads to innovation.
This is destructive, totally destructive. You know, like Aleppo is here, right now, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a different kind of leadership that has to rise there, which is not simple, and is extremely active to move it back into a complex space. It's going to take a lot of people to step forward powerfully from a place of
Fear.
compassion, not fear. Fear is what's happening now. It has to come from the only other source, which is love. You got two choices. That's it. Everything rises from that.
differentiate design if society is ordered or chaos?
Great question. Because in any given moment, it shifts, right? Society is a very big scope to look at. Do you mean the society in your country? It's the whole human society on the planet, the society in your city, the society in your, you know. So I think anywhere that you can, where you can see the pattern of it as being linear, it's in an ordered state, and where you don't have choice, it's moving into a controlled state. When you have freedom of movement, there's enough rules to keep you safe, but you have freedom of movement and autonomy to choose what you want to do and how expansive you want to make your life. That sits more in this space between chaos and order. Little more freedom. Very few, like, entire societies, hopefully they don't sit in chaos. That's kind of destructive, right? Most of them sit in order, in this form of order. Like, we have orders, we have laws, we have courts that govern things. So I think the thing to consider is, what is your own scope of influence to determine how you want to work with the systems you're in. So sometimes the systems you're in are very controlled and they don't want to change. Yes. And some of them are even into, like, stifling control. And within that, you have to look at, well, what's my circle of influence? And what can I change in that system in order to invite more participation and more emergence, so people can have the freedom at whatever level that's allowed in your system to express themselves and be creative and grow and expand.
I've learned about situational leadership. That means in different situations, you may need different type of leader.
Yes.
For example, if it happens, if we are in emergency situation, then authoritarian leader can be the one who can drive everyone forward.
Yep.
But if we are in different situation, then different types of leadership is important.
Yes.
So because situations change all the time.
Yes.
So we will need different types of leadership all the time.
Yes.
Not just like be fixated on one type of system, right?
Exactly, and that's what this points to. What does the situation call for, right? So if you're in an emergency, you think about, like, police and firefighters and military that have to go into a crisis situation. That takes just decisive action.
Right.
And the way they're able to do that is a little bit like the Aikido dojo. They practice the drills, they practice until your body knows how to respond. They've trained and trained and trained that they know the lines of communication and who makes decisions and how. They don't have to think about it. They can go in, do what needs to be done, and move it into complexity. And then they gather into those strategy, okay, what do we do next? And they figure out together. So that's a certain kind of leadership. That's different than if we're trying to create these deeply engaging learning environments, right? That's a different kind of leadership. Authoritarian leadership in that situation isn't going to be very engaging, just by definition. So it's very similar. I think you could probably map that right onto the Cynefin framework. And that's this point, that management is very helpful here and here. That this kind of leadership for emergence and complexity is helpful here. And yeah, a very direct practice, like organized in that way so that they can function this way in the midst of crisis, which is an interesting flip on it that I enjoyed pointing out. So this is called the Chaordic path, and that's a foundational pattern in the art of hosting and how we think about what's needed now. Okay?
If I could add just one piece that I find especially important in this model, and that is complex living adaptive systems want to move to order. If you allow them to, that's what living systems want to do. And what we often do is try to impose control to make that happen, rather than creating the environment in which it can emerge.
And I want to add the word healthy order.
Thank you.
Right? Because sometimes this sense of control feels like order, but not healthy order. So they will find their own rhythm and balance, which is a form of order, if you allow that to happen. It doesn't stay chaotic. You know, at first that little system we were doing felt kind of chaotic. If we continued to do that, it would have been like a dance. You would have found that, you know, the way the birds fly and that, that's because they practice every day. That was your first flight, you know, you had to practice more.
And at some point, an extremely controlled system, if it's a living adaptive system, conditions will change and you will have rebellion. It will take you into chaos in order to get to a new ordered state.
Yeah.
Because you have to have innovation.
And so what that model is actually, there's another piece in this, I don't have time to teach, but I'm going to show you. If you picture this border between simple and chaos, Dave Snowden describes it's kind of a cliff. And so in a controlled system, it's assumed that we can make life very simple. These are the rules. This is what happens. And yet it's a living system, so that's not what happens. And the longer that's assumed, the closer the situation moves to this little cliff. And as soon as it goes over that cliff, it falls into chaos, which is the rebellion. And once that happens, it's almost impossible to get it back. It has to go up into complexity, find its new living form, and then move back into order. So these collapses we're seeing around the world, horrible, horrible, and opportunity for new organization and living systems to find their own way forward. And yes, it is a destructive chaos that we go through to get there. You're working on building the new. Because sometimes it has to go through that destruction in order to free the living system to find its own way.
The way I think of our work is it's looking for where the light is and encouraging that light.
But I have a question. If this is any rule, that this is like a circle. Every organization we move from chaos, from complex, complicated to simple, and then to complete.
Not necessarily. Some, imagine some of the new entrepreneurial startups. They're beginning here. They're beginning with, we are finding a new way to organize ourselves. We're not going to start with a hierarchical model. So the co-working spaces, the collaborative projects, it's a flat, not an authoritarian. So it's not necessarily so that things move in any particular order. We do move, we don't jump from chaos to complicated, right? We may fall off simple into chaos and move here. And we may move from complex into complicated so that it becomes a rhythm that can be repeated, and that's good. That's when we begin to gain ground, to amplify our work.
And that's the process of practice I was talking about yesterday in terms of learning. What was totally chaos when you walked into the dojo, over time became part of my muscle memory, became complicated, and some of it actually became simple.
And then it moves.
Which then opened the opportunity for me to be more creative and innovative with that. And we're out of time.
Can you elaborate more on the creative and innovative indicators?
I'd be happy to over coffee or lunch.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're well over our time.
Please do.
We can keep talking about this and asking questions, and we'll hang these up. And
Is it possible to maybe put some resources in the Facebook group in terms of like videos that you
You bet.
recommend? Or
a lot of them are already in the manual that you've been given, the companion guide. There's a section in the introduction about the Cynefin framework. And there's a link there to Dave Snowden's video, which is 8 minutes long, super helpful to kind of walk through it. I use it all the time in my classes. And there are videos on the Art of Hosting website teaching these again and again. Huge resources on the Art of Hosting website.
And there's quite a list of resources at the end of the companion guide also.
Why is it important for Adams?
Good question over break.
Thank you, Circle Guardian Day host.
So we have a group that has prepared a world